Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Wings Podcast. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri. On today's show, we will meet Freyan, a content specialist who runs her own media agency called Word It Well. An experienced curator of content, Freyan worked as an editor-in-chief of two Mumbai newspapers. She is a proud developer of communities for whom her small but powerful agency creates impactful content for social media, newsletters, blogs, and much more. I have always been bestowed with wild opportunities to create my own path, and I have always chosen to take the road that is less traversed, Freyan proudly says. Welcome, Freyan, to this episode of Wings Podcast.
Thank you, Milind. Thanks for having me here.
So, word it well.
Yeah.
Sounds a very intriguing name. I mean, the title gives it off, but still, it packs a lot of surprises. Uh, why don't you unpack it for us?
Sure. What you see is what you get. It's words. Wording it well is what we do with everything that you want to communicate. And also, well is a repository as such of life-sustaining water. So we like the idea of saying that, we have that life-sustaining communication that you need. And it's also very deep. So you're talking about depth as well. So we had all of this in mind when we thought of this logo. And we have a pentagonal shape O in the logo, which is, and it represents every single alphabet of the word of the English language.
So very thoughtful and so very deep in its meaning. What you're saying is word it and word it well, in the sense that let it be a repository of life sustaining matter with all its depth and beauty. So beautiful, so beautiful. Who all has drawn from this well, and whose thirst has this well quenched?
First, it quenched my thirst for entrepreneurship, quite frankly. And it gave me a very exciting purpose apart from working for other organizations. So I would say I was the first one to benefit from the idea. It benefits, so Word It Well is a media and communications agency. And the fuel that drives it is my individual specialization as the content developer. And I'm supported by a great team of design people and SEO specialists and a lot of consultants in the field. And what we do is we guide clients across multiple verticals on how to sharpen and create effective communication, whether it be offline and in traditional media, right from advertising, magazine print ads, to your brochures and pamphlets, to even event communication like the backdrops and whatever is needed, as long as whatever is being made drives the core communication that is required. Then we take it online, of course, and we have our social media and our websites and things like that. So everything to do with communication, we try and better it. We try and make it a little crystal clear, and we make it easy to understand for the right target audience who we identify. So that's what we do.
So, Freyan, if I were to apply for a job at your agency, and if you were to look at hiring me as a content writer, what will you look for in me?
Very good question. I've worked as somebody who's luckily I've handled a lot of teams very early. So I understood one thing, that you don't hire someone based on their resumes. You hire someone based on your ability to basically, if I were to hire someone as a content specialist, I would look at their their life trajectory, where they're coming from, what motivates them to actually be writing, right? Uh, what are the factors that drive their discipline? And I would hire accordingly. I don't normally hire what is on the cream, like the top, but I hire what looks sincere, hardworking, and just nice personalities, so that working together is also a happy space. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question,
No, I mean,
but
just
I
curious. I did my engineering in electronics and telecommunications many years back, and
hmm,
I was chosen for a job as a field engineer in a company called Wipro, which is where I started my career
hmm,
many years
okay.
back. And there was just 2-3 months before I started interviewing. I had nothing to do. I had finished my exams. My results were out. I'd scored a distinction. I topped the university, by the way. Uh, and uh,
Wow,
and
that's not a by the way point.
no, and I was just wanting to have fun after some treacherous 2-3 months of hard study. And there was this
Yeah.
mama of one of my friends who had made a portable compressor which would fill in inflate car tires, and the compressor would work on the car battery itself. So it was a little box which had an extremely small compressor and two long tubes. One will both of them going to the car battery, and one a tube which will go and
Hmm.
inflate the tires. And it was a prototype, and he wanted to test it in the market, a small scale industry somewhere in Veera Desai Industrial Estate in Andheri in Mumbai. And he
Hmm.
wanted some young boys to see whether A, the product works, and B, if somebody is willing to pay some 2,000 rupees for that product then. And
Hmm.
my friend said, my mama is looking for somebody. Would you be interested? I said, chalo, dekhte hai. Karna kya hai? So he says, no, take this box and stand at a petrol pump. And whichever car comes, which is filling fuel, ask the driver or whoever is the owner driver to say, can I fill in this air for you? And he would be lo and
Ah,
behold surprised that we'll pull out a box, ask him to open the bonnet, plug the clips onto the battery, and the compressor would start, and I'll fill in the air. And there was no salary. For every box that we sold for 2,000 rupees, we would get 500 rupees. And I sold some 20
okay.
of them in about a week's time. And
Oh, how
incidentally,
old were you again?
I was 21,
Okay.
and there's this HP petrol pump next to Nanavati Hospital in Parla, which is
Hmm.
where I used
Hmm.
to stand there from, let's say, 10 in the morning till
At
3
the
in the
corner.
afternoon at the corner, and I'll kind of fill air. And my father was so livid that you are an electronics engineer, you have topped the university, you are a gold medalist, you're standing at a petrol pump and all, and you're doing all this. But you know why I'm telling you this story?
Uh,
Because when I got
huh.
selected at Wipro for my first job, when I told them this story, because they asked me, what did you do after your studies were over? I said, what have you been doing lately? I said, this is what I've been doing. I'm filling air at the petrol pump. And they were like fascinated with this story and says, we don't want to know anymore. Here is the offer letter. Join tomorrow.
Hey, interesting people make for interesting content.
So stories like these, I presume, is what you and Word It Well lives by, right?
Absolutely. Whether it is the hiring process or the working process, it is all about relating to stories, moments that capture your heart.
But then for the over the years that you've been running this agency and very successfully managing brand communication for various successful brands in the commercial capital of the country, over the years you must have figured out a formula for doing this thing, right?
Hmm, not really, because everything, see, the dynamic of each brand, unless, of course, you're a very high end brand, which had a lot of investment right in the beginning to sort of lay out brand guidelines and brand rules. Most of the brands we work with are genuinely defined by the people who make up their staff, whether it is the CEO that we're dealing with or the general manager that we're dealing with, or like a team of doctors or a team of social workers. Everything is always, you can't have a particular formula. Everything is driven by how they see the world, how they use their entire sensory systems to analyze their patient, their beneficiary, their customer, right? So you're looking at the world and you're trying to, add your, parts into the formula, which are very different,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also you have to understand that it is not a manufacturer business. You're not selling a product, right? If
Mm-hmm.
it was a product, it would need to meet certain formulaic specifications like a weight, a size, a shape, density, etc. But here you're selling an emotion, you're selling a story, you're selling a feeling. So no two people in general feel the same way about anything, right? So similarly, there cannot be one thing that hits everyone the same way. Like in a formula, you have what you input and you have what you output. So
Correct.
input and output is, it might be the same on the left side, but on the right side, the output is going to be different for everyone and vice versa. So it's a little bit more tricky than a formula. It cannot be formulaic. It has to go case by case. That is where we specialize, because we are not the kind of agency that takes on 100 things and, funnels them into a formula. We're an agency who will pay specific attention. We will go back, we'll say, what, we can do this for you. However, we would suggest to you to spend a little less money right now. Go back, change your logo first, then come back for this this huge project, because you have a fundamental mistake created in your foundation. So there is no formula when you're offering a vision of success to someone in my field. You have to go with what you think is best for you to explain first to that client or to that prospective client, explain to them why and how they should do things in different, and then of course put it into the works.
They say vision precedes strategy. But what I'm hearing from you seems to say that it's the identity that precedes a vision.
I completely, I mean, you've put it in very clear terms for me. But maybe I could not have been that clear about it. Identity
Because
does precede
businesses,
everything.
businesses do invest a lot of time on conceptualizing and creating a strategy and figuring out a structure to execute that strategy. And vision and mission seems to be just statements like placards on the walls of the offices,
Oh, yeah.
and hardly any attention goes to the identity piece, as to forget what I intend to do, but who am I?
Who am I? Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
the work
And
that you
also,
do,
Milind,
yeah, in the work
there
that you
are,
do, yeah, sorry to say this, but in the work that you do, how much does this question play a role?
well, so I'll tell you that most of the companies that invest their time and effort in vision, mission, and brand identity are the ones that can afford it, like the larger ones, the ones that are MNC, multinational, that are larger brands within, or smaller brands within a larger brand. But most of the people we work with in Word It Well are people who in general have common goals like social upliftment and welfare, or
Mm-hmm,
human welfare.
mm-hmm,
Um, and most of them are in such a hurry, God bless them, to do the good work,
mm-hmm,
that they're not really thinking about who they are and
mm-hmm,
who their brand identity is. So what tends to happen is, a lot of companies which are, new age, or maybe a little more, or who have, a collection of good, intelligent minds first, and then a company next. What they tend to do is they tend to look at all these things. Like they tend to therapize first, find out why they exist, what they exist for, and then they go out into the market. But we have been dealing, at least Word It Well has been dealing with a lot of clients who had that formula backward. They've started the good work. They put there, how you started at the petrol pump. You didn't think about it, right? You just started.
Correct.
Right. So we ended up always actually servicing and getting along very well with these kind of clients where first they start the work and then 5-10 years later they look around and say, hey, this is what we've developed. Oh, this is who we are. We are the pioneers in this. Oh, we are the change maker in that. So identity sometimes comes a little later.
Interesting you say this, because what I'm hearing is then these people whom you work with who are so deeply involved in their cause that the question of who am I and why am I doing it doesn't bother as long as the action happens. So because I know you work with a lot of NGOs and doctors and people in the social sector. So maybe love to hear a particular example or so of some client of yours whom you worked with where they do some amazing work which hardly anybody knows, and they have also not bothered to kind of publicize it or let the whole world know.
So I'll just draw from a conversation I had not even a few days ago with my best friend. So we were talking about it. She's got her finger on the political pulse of the country. She leans towards social activism, and sort of always, conversations are always about government is not doing enough or someone is not doing enough. And, that general way that you heavy news watchers and heavy, when you deep dive into all this activism, you end up with all of this. And every time we have this conversation, and we've been friends for like a long time. So every time we have this conversation, what ends up happening is that she gets very worked up and very upset. And I don't. So we were talking about it just earlier this week. And I realized that the reason I don't is that on a day-to-day basis, I am lucky enough to work with clients who are actual living examples of how society is uplifting itself. So I'm not listening to news channels or to social activists. No, I'm not dissing anyone. It's equally important, but this is where I am. I'm in a space where I work with NGOs that are constantly helping to create integrated village projects across Maharashtra, who are helping Vaidu community women in Mumbai city, who are giving aid to hospitals to construct new wings, who are teaching street children extracurriculars like karate, who are doing so many things that are just making it so wonderful, first of all, to do this kind of work that I do, like projecting this to the media and to social and through advertising, that I don't see the negative parts as much. So that is one thing my clients have given me, this very positive outlook on how, the world is going forward. Like I have a client, for example, who does something called a weekly speaker. It's not a podcast like yours, but it's a weekly speaker who comes in and attends their meetings. And it's one of those NGO clubs. So every week they have the speaker who will come in from some walk of life and talk about what they're doing. And usually the speaker comes from a place of eagerness, because the club in itself is extremely prestigious. Like it's been around for over 100 and something years. It's a legacy organization. And the speaker is usually very excited to be there because he knows these are high net individuals who can sort of help push a cause that they've been working on. And not to forget that they are also people, they are working on amazing causes. Like I met 2 weeks ago, I met a guy who's created a drone program for India. and it's not for use for you and me to take shots of our Lonavala trips and our Panchgani trips. It's for empowering villagers in rural India to use drones to plant seeds and farm. And it blows my mind. And in no other occupation or in no other agency would I have had a chance to know this and to work with this person. So good things are being done by great people, and I'm getting a chance through the clients of mine that I have to engage with these stories of greatness and goodness. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
But,
because
basically,
what really seems to be happening here is somehow your eyes and ears are probably very sensitive to listen into these stories that are happening in the social sector, which somehow nobody wants to call it the mainstream. Mainstream seems to be very commercial, for profit. However, one of my friends, she
yes,
runs an institution on caregiving, and she actually has done a math that the caregivers, it is actually unpaid work, if that were to be
correct.
quantified in terms of monetary contribution, that will be a significant contribution to the nation's GDP. But this work that happens in the social sector, which is stories on the side, seems to attract you. And through Word It Well,
Absolutely.
you are not only giving them a voice, but you're also giving them a presence. Something which I believe
Yeah.
you did in your stint as editor of the Parsi Times too, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, Milind, what do you think of when you think of Parsis?
For
What are
me,
the keywords?
so Parsi keywords is number one, eccentric, two, bindas, three, no nonsense, four, in your face, five, very happy, six, spreading love and joy to everyone, seven, extremely hardworking, uh, eight, ruthlessly honest, nine, very high on integrity, and probably 10, keeping quiet and doing the job silently.
Oh, wow. It's great to have someone say these things. But
No, I say this, Freyan, out of experience, because I've had the joy and a pleasure to know
experience,
and
yeah.
be a part of many, many Parsi friends.
So Parsi Times was a project that, like many other things, just sort of by the grace of God, just ended up in front of me. And in when you say, celebrate these stories, and how you thought of my Parsi Times stint was, uh, so within the Parsi community, you will find multiple layers of community. You will find people who are very well to do. There are people who are not so well to do as well. And in Bombay, there are pockets of Parsis living in colonies and communities which have been created by the Parsi bodies, and given to them at very low rent rates, because they are not able to afford more exclusive housing. So the community has its own layers of poverty, lower education, things that everybody sort of tackles with, and of course the added problems of non-multiplication, and less dwindling population, things like that. So when I must confess, when I started the newspaper as the founding editor, I was not a very well versed, well educated Zoroastrian. And the newspaper did a wonderful thing for me by making me more aware of who I was as my own brand and my own identity. And what I managed to do in terms of the paper itself as had its identity, right? It was not just a communication of what's happening. It was a communication of love, and it was a communication of giving. So we had the spirit of giving and the spirit of love. And what else can you give in a newspaper but column centimeter space, right?
Yes.
So we went on a giving spree. We gave people the opportunity to tell their stories. Usually, if you think of Parsi, you think of Tata, you think of all the big guys, you think of all the, you know, all Shapoji Palanji, all the big wigs, and a lot of people cover them. For like Parsi New Year, I keep getting asked to write about articles on all the Parsi big wigs, all the chief justices, things like that. But here we thought ulta. We thought, no, we have this space. We have to monetize this space. We have to create a successful media in the newspaper. But let's do that by sort of crowdsourcing uh, amazing stories of people who have not ever had a chance to tell their stories, or advertisers who've never had a chance to say mera ad newspaper mein aata hai, because newspaper ads are usually so ridiculously expensive. So right from the get go, it was about creating a sense of community, not by instilling pride in, past glories or in stalwarts in the readers, but in saying that you yourself are the pride of this community. Let's put your story out there. Let's put your ad out there. I remember there was this, I had a joyous time editing this newspaper. I met fascinating people. I met this lady. I met one lady first who was a set of three, a trio of sisters who used to make torans, those torans you put outside your door.
Yep.
Parsis put bead torans. They are not made of flour or any other material. They're made of small crystal beads. So we had this lady who sits with her two sisters at home, makes these bead torans out of a bag in Mumbai. And she was so sweet, and she was so hardworking, and she was like old and frail and would shake her way up to, the office to say hello. It's like there are no, I mean, we need to put out beautiful stories like this. One sister who's mobile and has the ability to move out, goes out, meets people, gets back work for two sisters who cannot move out of the house, was so impoverished very, very late in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Um, and we put their story out there. We celebrated their sisterhood. We celebrated their craftsmanship. We celebrated their Parsi Panu. And wow, they blossomed. They became famous. They started getting lots of work. If on an average you're not a marketing highly skilled effective communicator, you would be getting 1 to 2 orders a week or a month maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Here they were just flooded afterwards with orders just by the power of the ability that we gave them to take that space in the paper and to have their story told. Then they started advertising with us in the paper. So like that, we created a community where it was affordable to advertise. We chose a lot of quantity of ads so that we could give cheaper ads to more people and have them reach the community better. And also the quantity of stories. I was hell bent. We had 20 to 24 pages per week. We had to do at least 4 or 5 new people in each issue. 4 or 5 people had to be covered, whether it was a poll, whether it was a story, whether it was my faith, something or the other. But the mission was that how if you're covered by, like, now podcast is a digital medium, right? So
Correct.
when my podcast releases, I will keep it. I will keep the link with me because it's something that I have done for myself.
Correct.
So the idea was that every single Parsi household gets to keep, every single person in the community has one folded piece of Parsi time somewhere in their cupboard where on one day their photo came or their opinion poll came or they were mentioned in a story. So that was the aim.
So beautiful.
To get every bit out there.
So beautiful. So let's get some stats here, okay? In the midst of
Okay.
this something very emotional stuff, let's get some dry stats here. How long did you run the Parsi Times? And what were the circulation levels? Obviously, when you started, it was 0. but at the end of the journey, what was the circulation levels, and which households, or where did it go?
So, and I was told that, there's a Parsi newsletter. You want to be the editor? I said, great, let's do it. I walked into a ready-made shell of an office, and in the heart of Fort in Mumbai, there was uh, three designers, one Gujarati writer. Everyone was there already. First week, we printed 4,000 copies. I got into the van with the guy and delivered the copies to gates of Parsi colonies. We went from 4,000 copies to over 20,000 copies very fast within no time, not because we were sourcing spaces to put it, or nor were we promoting it. We had no other place to promote it, but we were getting calls. Send it to our colony also. Send it to our building also. So we would have to work backward. If some auntie called from somewhere in Cuff Parade, we would have to, find the newspaper wala who delivers to Cuff Parade, uh, find the distributor, and then work backward, reverse engineer the process till another 10 papers were added to print. So we went from 4,000 to 20, 30,000. And a lot of people would be so sweet. They would come to office and say, Acha, I'm going to Houston, or I'm going to London. I would love to take the paper with me for everyone. So it was like people were carrying papers, Australia, UK, everywhere. There was a Parsi Times going. It was just happening all over the world. So that was really fun. It was nice to know.
Truly democratic, isn't it, Freyan? I mean, if you look at the definition of democracy, the Parsi Times seems to be a very democratic affair. It is for the community, by the community, and of the community, and of course taking it globally. But then you were shaped and trained and molded by two amazing women journalists of India, Sabina Merchant and Farida Master.
I was in midday as a staff writer, sub-editor, junior editor, directly under Sabina.
Mm-hmm.
And she was wow. Like, I remember being a young kid, and there was me and another friend of mine, both of us young girls, who had joined, and I was obviously working through college, and this was one of my most impactful jobs that I did. In my first interview that I did as a midday writer happened to be my uncle and aunt, Dr. Grant and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I did that interview, and it turned up on the front page at the bottom, that interview space, that social space of midday at that time. And I was so excited because my editor had given me this chance, which you don't see a lot. I mean, I've been part of a couple of different newspapers now, and I see how an editor can impact the confidence and the courage and the enthusiasm to learn and grow of any writer.
Mm-hmm.
And Sabina was really that phenomenal editor, phenomenal boss. I would say I look at her as somebody who always, I don't know if she knew it, but she was absolutely instilling confidence in me, throwing me at events. Like, just looking back at it, like, I went to so many events, and my confidence just grew. And in those events, I would meet people, I would take interviews on the spot. So she was great for giving me opportunity. She didn't blink when she gave opportunities. She just knew she was giving them. And Farida, of course, I know that she was like one of the most senior people in Pune, in the newspaper business. And she was also a Parsi lady. So there was both that, looking up to someone from my community, looking up to someone who's this woman who's like ruling, doing her thing in like Times, Pune Times was like, wow. So yeah, so they had a great impact on me. I think subconsciously, it was always subliminal, but I always think I wanted to emulate a lot of things of both of them, two different, absolutely opposite, I mean, very different people, but both inspired me very much.
And this young teenage Freyan, who was in the midst of uh, these two amazing, highly energetic women journalists, just probably a few years back, as a school kid, instead of going to schools, she was traveling across oceans as a daughter of a merchant navy captain.
That is correct. So got very I had a very interesting childhood.
Uh-huh.
my my dad is an ex merchant navy captain, so I and my mother was also a student from the same school. So she managed to ensure that I got the opportunity to take all my curriculum and my books with me every year on ship, and she would teach me, the proper teacher. She would teach me on ship, and I would come back and give my exams. And it was it was amazing. I mean, to know it, it is still an amazing feeling to remember that, you know, I had that many passports when I'm growing up. I had so many like visa stamps. Nobody had it, and traveling is now all the hip, is
Correct.
the rage now.
Correct.
But nobody did it like that in those days. I mean, that was some crazy traveling. Every place that had a sea coast, a shipping coastal trade, I guess I've been there. Um,
So
yeah,
you missed traditional school, right?
I wouldn't say I missed it because I was there present for a few months every year, and by the time I was in the 8th and 9th grade, when chemistry just did not make sense to my mother, and it became very frustrating for both of us.
Uh-huh.
You know, this learning,
Mm.
teaching and learning cycle.
Mhm.
I was I stayed back when everyone else went on ship, and yeah. So for the formative years of my life, pretty much on my own with my sibling, and in the ocean, braving the storms, enjoying looking after everyone who was seasick, because I never felt seasick, and enjoying living that ship. Like, I wrote a lot of poetry. I was pretty much alone. Wrote a lot of poetry, watched a lot of movies, saw a lot of museums thanks to my mom, who loves art and culture. And yeah, it was very different. And school friends, I got very lucky with my school friends, because I don't think I had many years to solidify those great relationships with them. As you know, I mean, most of them is seeing each other every day, right, for like 200 to 300 days of a year, and I'm seeing you for like two months, right? 2 or 3 months. So how do you solidify relationships like that? But I got really lucky. I have a great group of school friends also.
You
So
know, they say that schooling is not just about education. Of course, it is primarily about education, but it's also about ability to probably discover one's place in the world uh, through friends and through a whole lot of social uh, uh, upbringing. And in those formative years, be it schooling or high school or college, one of the things that all of us are seeking is affirmation that you matter. And by and large, for all of us who have grown amongst people, family, friends, etc., the sense of self-worth does come from others, but it does matter. However, different people take different paths. I mean, you can't be sitting as a judge and evaluating, but then for many, conformity and obedience comes very naturally. Whereas for a few, a sense of agency, of believing in one's own self-worth, not because somebody else is saying you are good, but you inherently know that you're good, you matter, and you can contribute. This sense of agency is a very interesting theme you seem to have picked up for a magazine of your own that you're going to soon launch.
Yeah. So when you say a sense of agency, agency is basically a term that means uh, having control over your actions as well as their consequences. I've also been very lucky to be chosen as a change maker, identified as one of the change makers for change.org,
Mm-hmm.
an international association that has a change maker program in India called She Creates Change. I was part of their batch, I think the second batch of change makers, 30 of us at the time. And the organization taught us how to identify within ourselves uh, who we truly are, and to recognize the difference that we can make,
Mm-hmm.
either through petitions or through commandeering change, and to also seeing the world through this, these uh, a more of an intelligent way to understand how you can make positive change. So I got a chance at the time, this is about 3 years ago. I got a chance at the time to meet a lot of people who were amazing change makers. I mean, some of these girls came in and today they are running their own political parties and winning elections in South India. Some of them are changing the way politicians are running things in other parts of the country. Some of them have changed legalese in India. You know, some of them are phenomenal stories. And what each of us has been taught to do or should ideally be doing is harnessing what we can use going forward and using what powers we already have, existing powers, to make positive changes. So my existing power is communication. My existing power is understanding stories from a point of empathy and being able to project them forward. May not be the best person to change a law or to create political impact or to build roads in villages, but I am most certainly the person who can take that story and project it where it matters, whether you have to get funding for the project or whether you have to get people to involve themselves as volunteers, workers, or people who you employ or people to whom you disperse your funding. I'm at that space, whether it is in Word It Well or in most other places of my life. I'm the kind of person who builds that network for people through communication. I'll always know someone who knows someone who knows someone who can do something for you.
Mm-hmm.
You come to me, I'll solve a problem. Like, like that, communication problem. So, born out of that is the idea for Agency Magazine, which is something I'm launching. It's a personal, a personal project. And the idea is that every single article and every single thought within the magazine will, of course, number one, be entertaining content. Number two, be useful content. And number three, it will be content that will make you think about how you can do something with your own agency, because identifying your agency not only helps you build a better external world, but it will be great for you to use for your own self. And a lot of people don't know the concept and the meaning of the word agency in itself. So I'm hoping to popularize that, as the magazine takes off. We've got some great content for our first issue already, and the cover is I'm very excited because I've always wanted to celebrate my grandmother, who's an artist who lives in Pune, and I'm getting a chance to actually use some digital the art in digital format on my covers. I'm very, very excited by the thought of launching the magazine.
What a beautiful project. And you said it's a personal project that was
Yep.
born through your membership of the change.org organization, where You conceptualized and created your own path in order to make a difference. And there is this poem of Robert Frost called The Road Not Taken that we all of us have read and studied in school, especially those who have gone to English medium schools. And
Yes.
the last paragraph of that, I wish to read it out to you right now. It says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Looks
Yes.
like that is Freyan Bathena's story.
Yes.
That she seems to be attracted to the roads that are less traversed by or traveled by, with a hope and belief that she can make a difference because she wishes to make a difference through her own agency, her own belief in herself, and deploying her craft of communication in service of that wish to make that difference. So this has been such a wonderful, wonderful thought that you're leaving us with, Freyan. I hate to bring the curtains down on such a beautiful conversation, but sadly the podcast format has a time boundary, which I have to honor and respect. Just as in your magazines, you have a space boundary of certain column centimeters that you have to adhere to. So let me quickly ask you, what has this conversation left you with?
First, a big smile on my face. That's for sure. I've enjoyed it. It's actually been a little bit therapeutic to have a chit chat about things that matter to me and maybe of consequence to other people if they are going to tune in and sort of pick on anything I put out there. Thanks a ton, Milind. You actually have made it a very seamless and stressless conversation to have. I was a little bit nervous to put my thoughts out there, but I do realize that when I start rambling, I get very passionate, and I don't know if I've genuinely stuck to your time constraints or not. So thanks a ton. I'm very honored to be featured in Wings podcast, and I look forward to hearing it when it's out also, and asking a lot of my friends to hear it. And hopefully, if they hear it, they will also look at my magazine once it's out there.
Yeah, why not? Why not? And, I don't mind, exploring with you offline, after our conversation is over, because on the sidelines, I also do write. And I don't write long, big columns or stories. It's just that it's a way for me to express whatever happens to me. I express, and the expressions.
The world brings the right people together.
I guess so. And these expressions are short, small, but maybe some of those 4-liners that I have written, which is lying unpublished for years together, I could talk to you and see if it could be worth showing up in your agency magazine.
Of course, bring it on. Yeah. More than happy.
Great, Freyan. You have a great time and have a wonderful day and wonderful time ahead. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks, Milind. Thank you, Asha. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you for your time today, my dear listeners. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri, signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as a piece of any professional advice. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of its guest. Creators of this podcast expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct or indirect, consequential or other damages arising out of any individual's use of this podcast. For feedback and suggestions, please write to wingsindia75@gmail.com. Thank you.